you should know music. You should learn the piano. You should be able to communicate. You know, if somebody changes the key, you should know, right? And you should hustle and look for talent. And know that it's not a job, it's a passion and a vocation. And you can't do it part-time. I couldn't. I think what a great producer is somebody who is born or real strong combination of natural talent and learned ability to feel what excites and can move popular culture and helps guide people to that end. It's about moving. It's the real goal for all of us is to move popular culture. That's what we're trying to do. Yeah, everybody wants to get paid, and that's very, it's very popular these days. I mean, talking about it, but the fact is what we're really trying to do is impact popular culture. And when you can do that, it's really rewarding. So a great record producer understands that instinctively and does everything he can to help move the needle.
Absolutely. But you then would have to look at production on the several different capacities that it can be seen in. Artist as creative producer of their own works, great. Artist as also creative producer of his or her work and administrator of the budget, maybe. Artist as creator and producer of the work, administrator of the budget, setter of the schedule, collector of the union forms when applicable, and all those things. So again, production in the big picture has some very administrative roles, and an artist as producer would often have management that would then step in and take over those aspects of the production. But yeah, artists are absolutely capable of producing themselves at all times, especially if they're shown how to navigate some of the, slightly more technical aspects of recording. Then with no problem can they produce and will they produce their own music. A person like Neil Young, I only met him briefly one time and recorded him, but he struck me as artist, producer, engineer, mixer. I mean, he's done it all. He's worn all the hats. So in cases like that, absolutely, the titans can produce themselves. It wouldn't be a mistake. It would just be that you got to make your first record, no matter what. You have to have your first baby if you're going to have children, no matter what. And you look back on that first event where something that didn't exist before is suddenly in the world, and you would do some things differently. You would be armed with the knowledge of, okay, I understand the process, even the subtleties of the process or the real obvious aspects of the process. So they don't make mistakes. They can't know. And so they have to navigate that first date as best they can. Because artists that are making their 15th or 16th record are more likely to make massive mistakes because they're quite sure that they know what's going on, and that makes it easier to be wrong. If you just plain don't know, hell, anything can happen then. There isn't one. I like to get everything as much done live as possible because then that's a lot less for me to do later. And it feels good. But it depends on the kind of record you're making. You might be making a record that is loop-oriented, sample-oriented, pop-oriented in that way. And there's no such thing as the live tracking date. It's here's all the programming, here's the vocals, let's add some live drums later. So it just depends on the song. But the kind of music that I like to listen to would almost always originate with a live session and most of it being kept. I just, you don't know, you hope. You think that one sounded good to me, that's the take, and you hope that later on it still sounds good to you, and usually it does. I mean, again, once you do this just a few times, you get a real sense of what felt good and what didn't. Did it feel good or did it not? Is it working as a song? Does it sound like a record in the control room even though it's just the basic tracks, So if you sit back and go, man, this sounds good, it does. It sounds good. Unless you're, a functional moron in the studio, and then in that case, you should just not be in there. But I make mistakes. You know, I think that something's a take, and 4 days later, I don't like it anymore. I'm in that situation right now, and I'm about to put new drums on a track because I'm not happy with it, and I can't put my finger on it, except that it doesn't make me happy every time I open it. And that's, you know, not a good sign for something that is supposed to go on a record, because I'll skip it. You know, I don't want everybody skipping it.
Today is an amazing world because everything is at play, from what the traditional record producer did to what the future of record production will be. And one of the things we talked about is that before there was recording technology, there was no real word producer. If you were Beethoven or Mozart, you conceived the symphony in your head, you had your orchestra, you knew it would be performed in a space, and you never separated production from the music in your head. Once recording technology was invented, what was in your head was separated from how it was recorded. And so overseeing that process is really one of the jobs of what the producer became. We are going to produce, we are going to make, we're going to manufacture this audio recording. And so in the earlier days of the business, all the jobs were more segregated, where you had a recording studio with a recording engineer and a team of people responsible for recording music. You had musicians who were responsible for writing the music and playing the music. You had the producer who was responsible for overseeing the recording, the creation of the music, and interfacing with the record company, and responsible for how that record would sound. In today's world, those lines have blurred a lot, that artists have recording studios in their houses. Producers own recording studios. Musicians can produce their own music. What I find is still needed is people with talent and expertise, and that can oversee the global process. And the way that role of producer can change on a daily basis for me is reflecting how it changes for what a particular artist needs. The first type of artist that I tend to work with is the band. That's how most, I think, music traditionally was made. A group of people meet, they write music together, they perform it. The role of the producer traditionally then would be, we need to record this band, capture their sound, interface them with the right recording studio, make them feel comfortable so they can be the band that they were meant to be, and provide an outside source of feedback as to perhaps what were their strongest songs. Was there a song that could be edited? Did it go on too long? Should a verse be cut? Should a chorus be doubled? It was the mechanics of music making, and most producers of that type were very skilled in understanding song structure. They were skilled in being politically correct, because you wouldn't want to anger anyone in a band. They were skilled in being business people, so they can interface with the record label. The next type of production would be for the, let's say, the singer-songwriter who doesn't have a band at their disposal. And it's more than just putting them in a recording studio. We need to find musicians for them that could help facilitate the musical creation that's in their head and get it to come out of the speakers. Well, that's more of the role that the producer/musician/engineer phenomenon, of which I am one, has arisen out of, because the hat that we need to wear on a daily basis changes from the different aspects of the job we need to do. So if you're a singer, you're a songwriter, you come to me with a song, well, the first thing we do is a traditional analysis, as the traditional producer I described would have done. We look at the structure. We look at the tempo. We look at the key. Is it in the right key for the vocalist? We look at a whole bunch of things, and from my perspective, hopefully not in a dysfunctional way, but as an objective outsider presenting to the artist, have you thought about this? Have you considered that? And the beautiful part of today's technology is if we want to hear a song faster, slower, in a different key, we can do that very easily.
I think it's enormously important that the recording engineer be really good. Again, I'll use another film metaphor. The engineer is like the cinematographer. And in ways that the visual arts have been empowered recently in the digital age with, you know, these great editing programs and Photoshop, and you know, you can manipulate sound in a similar way, and so the tools are more prevalent than ever. But it's still important to understand the underlying concepts behind having all these great tools. So the engineer is enormously important, and it's a full-time job. And my hat's off to people who record everything on their own and also play. And and I've only done that once, and I don't like doing it. I love having a partner like my cinematographer, my engineer, who's going to bring something to it as well, and who is focusing on getting the greatest possible sounds. And acoustic recording is still one of the more difficult arts. It's a science that has to become an art, and recording an orchestra may look easy, but it's not. Of course, it depends on the orchestra, but it also depends on where you place the mics. And recording a drum kit live is one of the more difficult things you can do. And my hat's off to people that have the passion and the patience to spend their lives making that great, like a great cinematographer. And I've engineered all my life out of necessity, but when I don't have to, I want a real pro.
An engineer makes a recording. It takes a producer to make a record. The engineer's job is to record the information as well as possible, and to make sure that the light is red at the right time, and to not erase anything. But those are not the producers. The producer's job is to finish. He's the only person who has to finish. And like I said yesterday, I start finishing the first day. And my old manager, Herbie O'Mell, used to say, it's really amazing, when the budget's gone, Jim's done. And I try to work it out about that way. When the money's gone, the project's over, But yeah, that's the most unique thing that the producer has to do, is finish. And invisible is not the right term, because you're not invisible. You are very visible. Your work is invisible. What you're actually doing is invisible. If they can see it, it's not working. Production is invisible. The producer is very visible. And you have to be willing to make a complete and utter fool of yourself in order to really produce a record. I've seen Tom Dowd do unbelievable things. I mean, this is a man, dignified, doesn't even begin to say it. I mean, the coolness this man had. And yet, I've seen him do utterly ridiculous things in the moment to make the cut work. And you have to be willing to do that. And also, of course, it's your fault. Whatever happens, it's your fault. And if something good happens, then you don't get the credit, but you get the blame. But it's the way it should be. On a record, the artist's name goes at the top in the big typeface. The producer's name, if you're lucky, goes on the back at the bottom in the smallest typeface known to man. And that's the way it should be. And if a producer doesn't understand that, they got no business doing it or calling themselves a producer. No artist wants to give it up, as I said yesterday on the panel. Because in the creative process, once they stand at the microphone and perform, then the performance becomes a collective ownership. Before they've done that, before they've performed, they own it. It's theirs. It's internal. And none of them really want to give it up. The most eager artist, will sabotage himself in order to keep from performing. I think you need to understand a little of all of it, because it's a collaborative process. Both of those words are important, collaborative and process, And I think you got to understand a little what you're doing, but you can't get lost in the wire, because that's like listening to the magnaplaners. You just get trapped, and you've drifted too far from the reality of the situation, which is to steal the performance from an artist who's reluctant to give it to you, in a room full of people who all have agendas. I even want the engineer to fool me if he can. When I figure out what he's doing, if I don't like it, I'll tell him, because I am the boss. But if I tell him to do something wrong, and he can do it the right way without me finding out, more power to him. Same thing is true of a co-producer. I haven't done that much co-production because I do feel like myself, in absentia production is the highest form of the art, and I can't do it. I have to be there. And I feel like my physical presence influences the performance, and when I can't do that anymore, I'll stop. But that necessitates me being there. So I don't understand these Rick Rubin people who come in the morning and say, oh, well, what are you going to do? And they lay it all out, and they say, okay, I'll come back at 5 o'clock. And they come back and they listen to what the artist has done, and they point their finger at the speaker like a monkey, and they say, I don't like that, I like that. I don't understand that. I can't do that. And co-production, I think, can lead itself to that. You know, but co-production with Lenny was always a pleasure. You know, in the analog process, what you're doing as an engineer is because what you record, what is sound? It's the molecules in the air bouncing together. So you're starting with molecules, you're turning it into electrons, and then playing it back through a speaker and turning it back into molecules. While it's electrons, you can screw with it. You can EQ it, you can compress it, you can mix it, you can blend it, you can subtract from it, you can add to it, you can overdrive it, you can underdrive it. You can do any number of these things in combination that change the character of the sound to where what went in is not what comes out. You know, sometimes you want the same thing. You want exactly the same thing that you started out with, which in analog is never going to happen. In digital, it sort of does. But you still have to manipulate that because it's not going to happen by itself. But that's the role of the engineer. When it's molecules on this side, it belongs to the musicians. When it's molecules on this side, it belongs to the audience. In the middle, when it's electrons, it's yours.